Welcome to our series, The Future of Keynote Speaking in a Hybrid Meeting World. I'm Rich Gibbons, and today we're joined by a 30-year veteran of the event management industry. 24 of those have been with Merit's Global Events, where he is currently an account strategist, working with Fortune 500 companies on all of their events. He's a true industry pro and surfer extraordinaire, Tom Ryder. Tom, welcome.
Thank you, Rich. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a nutty time. You and I have been doing this for a few years, and I can't remember anything like this going down.
No, it's definitely unusual for us and for everybody out there in the world. As you know, we've been through some ups and downs, and with .com bust and 9/11, and yeah, this is a big one.
So just to set this up, Tom, I think we could probably fill the Library of Congress a couple times over with all that's been, talked about and written about purely virtual meetings where you don't have a single person in the room. But what I'd really like for our conversation to focus on would be, an inevitable return to live meetings. But of course, once we get back to live events, we all know there's going to be a non-trivial component of our collective audiences, the audiences that we serve, that are going to be virtual. Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely. I think that everything that we've been practicing for the last 3 months or so is going to carry over to when things do get back to normal. But before we get back to normal, we're absolutely going to be using this technology and these practices as a way of doing business.
Exactly. And I won't speak for you. I'm sure you would echo it, but I'm astonished at how fast the environment is changing. It seems like what's applicable today, it might not be applicable next week. So I guess the preface to this conversation is this is what we know now, and just kind of unpacking that a little bit, but it is changing. And I'm sure you've seen, plenty of change just over the last few days and weeks.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It is, as we say, a fluid situation, right? We're all tired of that word, but it couldn't be more true. We're working on things today that in 2 days have changed already. So it's a matter of really keeping up to speed on what is it that we're delivering to our clients.
Yeah, exactly. And fluid. And the other one that I've been banished from using by one of my business partners is pivot.
Pivot. Yeah.
Use the word pivot. Yeah, well, so one of the reasons I was fired up to talk to you, you're not only a grizzled, battle-hardened veteran with decades of experience in the business, but you are really, you're not in some ivory tower. You're kind of at the coalface there with your customers, figuring out the kind of day-to-day practical elements of executing these large events. And I know that I'm not exactly sure how to reduce it to a question, but I do know that if you were visiting properties with your big corporate clients, last fall and saying, okay, well, this is what we expect in terms of an audience size. This is the space. This is the hotel block. And then, of course, all that just goes up in smoke by virtue of the fact that you've got audience densities and all kinds of physical distancing. So what's that been like, kind of navigating all that?
Well, I tell you what, it's a whole new world with that. So, and we're writing the playbook as we go. And what we found is that moving forward with these events, the first step is to sit down with a client or talk to the client and find out, is the program already booked? All right, number one. If it's booked, then let's look at that contract. Let's pull it out. Let's see, of course, what your dates are, but what's the meeting space that you have? What's your what's your room block look like? Your food and beverage minimum. So let's take that first,
right?
And let's go to the hotel and contact the hotel. Now you can go another route, which is you haven't booked it yet. right? That's a totally different route. And then you need to contact the hotel and get the space and work it from that angle. But most of my clients, we've already have the contract in place. So contact the hotel. The issue, the hurdle with that has been that most hotels have been closed up until about 2 weeks ago. Some are still closed, but the ones that I've been working with, they were still closed and just opening. And so we had to start from scratch. They were starting from scratch. They were still coming up with their standard operating procedures for all their guests, right? So that's one subset. They also needed to put together, okay, for groups, what does that look like for physical spacing? That's very different than what it is for the rest of the guests who are in there. So they work on that. They bring it to us and we say, okay, now you know what our meeting space is. We have 2,000 people that we want to meet and feed safely.
Right.
What is the number we can actually do? And so that number, it's all across the board, but it might be 40% of that. It might be 50% of that. Depending on the hotel, you could get everybody in. But so I call that the magic number. And that's the key number that you need is what is the number of participants that you can have at said hotel that you can, under the regulations of that hotel and that city, depending on what phase that city's in, that you can meet and feed safely. And so once you have that number, go back to the client and say, okay, this is the in-person number. Let's look at what you want to do for the virtual number, right? And it's really 2 events in one that you have to put together.
Well, so when you think about the virtual side, and obviously Merritt's is coming to the table as basically a turnkey solution for these corporate buyers, where whether it's live and in person, or 100% virtual, or a mixture of both. One of the things that you're probably coaching and furnishing counsel on is the virtual element of that, and the virtual platform that they might leverage. And I know that everybody and their brother is coming out with a virtual platform. And I would imagine that you've got an opinion about the vetting process and sort of scrutinizing those virtual platforms, and what should they be thinking about when they go out to market and they sort of tire kick these products?
That's a great question, and one that we get from all of our clients, quite honestly. And what we have found is, first of all, we've gone out to the market and we have looked at over 60 virtual platforms. So we've looked at a large number of them. We have sent RFPs to a large number of them, but we have looked through all these platforms and we've whittled that list down to about 4 or 5 that we feel we can represent well to our clients, that they're going to do what they need to do in the different buckets. So you might have a lower tier option, a middle tier option, and an upper tier option, depending on what the client's needs are. You might just need a simple virtual event to go along with your hybrid event that's simple, inexpensive, don't need the bells and whistles, or you might want the high end, version. So, but we are, as a company, Merritt's Global Events, we're not married to these virtual platforms. We really act as a consultant with our clients, and we say, look, these are the virtual platforms that we work really well with, that we have a preferred agreement with and work seamlessly with and can with your events. But if you choose something else, we can work with that too. It really is a matter of sitting down with the client and finding out what their needs are and what they want to do.
Right. And boy, if ever there was a time to put a premium value on reliability, it's now. And we have a big corporate customer whose anonymity will protect. But they had a big event recently where it was behind a credentialed login admission. So it's sort of like you had to show your badge to get in. And it just, the number of people that sort of came through the front door, quote unquote, crashed the server.
Right.
And it just, the whole thing kind of cratered from there, and they had to switch platforms and servers. And that's not where you want to be investing your time.
You don't. And the thing is, and what we're finding is, And this is from what we found by just looking at these companies, but also a lot of feedback from our clients. Couple things. One, there are a lot of companies out there, a lot of virtual platforms out there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Most of them are brand new or fairly new, right? And they look great on paper, but once you start diving in, you start peeling back the onion, like, I'm not sure if this is the kind of company we want to be with. Number two, there are companies that have been around for 10, 15 years. But I tell you, the common thing that we see out of every single one is they're all overwhelmed because they weren't expecting this either.
Right.
And they can't keep up with the business. So that's part of what you need to look for too, is a partner that is going to stand behind the agreement. We have seen with some of our clients that have gone through the first round of virtual events, they have come to us and say, okay, we need help. Like this was painful. What are those pain points?
Sure.
And the number one pain point is service. I can't get anybody on the phone. I can't get anybody to help me. And number two, I would say, is probably the package that they bought in at. They can't do what they wanted to do. And okay, I know we bought this, but now we want that. Well, you can't do that now.
I've got a colleague who, I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but something like, I like it when things kind of go a little wrong because it gives me a chance to show why I'm involved and how I add value. And when things go a little bit wrong with a virtual platform like that, and there's nobody to talk to, that's where I would imagine they really fall down.
And for Merits, that's where we come into play. Part is on the pre-event side and really helping guide the client with making the right choice with the virtual platform. But it's also to put in place a new position that we have, which is a digital event manager. So as a project manager, this digital event manager is that middleman person that's working with the client, working with the virtual platform, working with the production company to make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do and giving that extra level of service to the client.
So you say you've got that, it's a customer conference. It's, an annual staff summit where you've got employees coming in or you've got clients coming in. And, it could be a global thing. Say they're coming from all over the world. There are economics of putting on that meeting. And let's say it goes from 1,000 people to 200 people, 200 people in the room and you get 800 people virtually. How does the balance sheet and the P&L of that event change for the event stakeholders?
Because, most of the events for this year, and if they're still being held in this year in the fall, if they aren't being held, they've been moved to 2021, right? So these events have been contracted, they have a budget in place. And when you go from an in-person, either a in-person meeting to a totally virtual or an in-person meeting to a hybrid, either way, there's a major cost savings. And if you're looking at an event that is global and you have international attendees, a good chunk of that is international travel, the airfare. That's a huge price. So, on average, depending where you're coming from, EMEA area, you're probably looking at average price of $1,300, $1,600 a ticket. APAC is more than that. It's probably more in the 2,000 range for just coach air. So that's a big chunk of the budget. Plus you have the room block. So you're not going to need as many hotel rooms, and food and beverage. You're not going to need as much as food and beverage. Those are really the main big ticket items. Right. So when you're looking at a hybrid event, you are going to have a major cost savings depending on the size of the event, but you're going to have a cost savings. Right. And when you're thinking about what virtual platform you want to go into, that's a fraction of what you would spend on an in-person event.
There's positive arbitrage in that, you have additional costs, but you're losing so much cost, you're in the black.
You're still going to have production. You already had production with the in-person, most likely, right? But you're still going to have that. Production is not going to go up for the virtual. It probably will stay the same, might go down a little bit, but that's not really a factor, I don't think. It's more those other variables those will definitely go down, and you'll add a lot more to your budget.
Obviously, if you're baking that into your budget, where you're responsible for not only the freight of getting somebody from some remote destination, but also feeding and watering them, and housing them while they're there. That's something that can be proactively managed, as opposed to, yeah, I know I told you back in January they're going to have 1,000 people. Well, it's changed to 200, right? And then the hotel's grousing about, oh, well, your contract says, and you get into force majeure and all that. But if you can, if you're negotiating something now, that's a little different than trying to mop up something that was negotiated back in January.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's all about communication, right? So the communication, constant communication with your supplier, i.e. the hotel, because you're working through this scenario to get that magic number with the hotel. So what we found is that when you get to that number and you go back and say, okay, well, that number is now 40% less than what we were going to be, in person altogether. Some of the hotels are coming back and saying, well, our position on that is, so it's a little, it's a little dicey, and it's going to change, every month as far as what phase the city is, and if they go back a step or go forward. So the hotels are not completely committing to, yeah, don't worry about the 40% reduction in rooms or the F&B, but they're going to work. They're going to work with you, but the key is communication. You just got to work with them and let them know what the rationale is, what the thinking is with your client, with the executive leadership.
Well, Tom, thank you for sharing some time. It's a wacky time, but I'm excited to see how this hybrid landscape. I think it's just an inevitability that you're going to have live events come back, but they're not going to look like they did 12 months ago, and that whole landscape and fabric is just going to be so different.
Agreed. I think we're in agreement as a corporation that this is what we're going to be doing with our clients over the next at least 12 to 16 months, or hybrid events. We think that's going to be the most popular format for 2021 for sure.
Onward and upward, and thanks for sharing the time.
Great. Thanks, Rich. Good to talk to you.